Today's video is going to be a diagnostic guide for the DJI O3 FPV system. In this one, we're going to cover subjects such as power, binding, OSD setup, issues, and then signal problems. However, much of the information in this video, whilst is going to be related to O3, is also relevant to the original DJI FPV system and even the Avatar HD system as well. Hopefully, by the end of this video, if you're someone who is having problems with a part of your O3 system, you would either have been able to resolve them or know what to check to be able to get it working as it should be. Just before we get into it though, I just want to say if you do find this video useful, please do make sure you are a subscriber of the channel. If you'd like to support us to allow us to keep making content like this in the future, please also consider checking out the link to my Patreon in the description. I would not be able to keep making content like this without the support of my patrons, and I just want to say a massive thank you from me to all of my patrons for all of the support they have already given. Anyway, let's get on with it and let's talk about power first of all. Okay, on power, the first thing we're going to talk about is specification. The O3 E unit has an input voltage range of 7.4 to 26.4 volts or 2 to 6S. Power consumption wise, it will draw about 15 watts, which equates to 1.5 amp at 10 volt, about 900 milliamp at 4S or 600 milliamp at 6S. BEC wise, it will depend on what the voltage is that the BEC is providing. For instance, as I've said, it will draw about 1.5 amp at 10 volts. So a 1.5 amp BEC will be fine for any output above 10 volts. But if the output of the BEC is below 10 volts, it really does need to be 2 amp. With regards to power, there are some basic things you need to be aware of. The O3E unit will not work from USB. I have seen a few people question why they can't get their O3E unit to bind, and it turns out that they were actually trying to power it via that USB-C port on the side. The only way you are going to be able to get your E unit to power up is by using the power input for the main unit on its harness. That is the port that is located down here on the side of the unit here, and then this needs to be wired to your flight controller or at least to your battery to be able to power the unit up. When you do have it connected, what you should see when you power it up is as follows. When it first powers on, the LED should go green. This is as the E unit is booting. This LED is located just above the bind button here on the right side of the E unit as you're looking at the DJI logo towards you, but then it will change from green to red. If you are not getting that LED, your E unit is not receiving power. You should then look at how it is connected to either your power supply or your flight controller. For instance, if you're using an aircraft such as the Defender 25 from iFlight, that actually has a power switch on the VTX output that will not supply power to the E unit unless you've got that option properly configured. At the very least, you should have this red LED. If you're not, you then need to start working back and understanding why your E unit is not getting power. If it's connected to a flight controller, the chances are either the BEC isn't working or there is a switch option on that BEC that you need to configure before trying to use it. Now, there is one last thing that you do need to take into account with regards to power on your O3 system that is critical. The O3E unit does come with a harness with a connection on each side. There are many flight controllers that have the exact same connector for their digital VTX input. However, do not assume the pinout or the wiring order is exactly the same. Just because DJI have used a connector that is the same as what manufacturers use on their flight controllers does not mean it's pinned out the same. It is possible that it could be pinned out differently, and plugging it in wrong will result in your O3E unit getting burnt out. You should double check that even if the connector is the same, that the pinout is correct, that the positive and negative is in the right places, and don't assume that it is correct simply because it fits. Now, there has been one other thing that I have seen cause this issue, and that is using a smoke stopper. If you're using a device like this from ViFly, this should be absolutely fine, but I have seen situations with people using the bulb style smoke stopper on their new quad build cause issues with the O3E unit on arming. If you have a new build and you're testing it and you are seeing it disconnect when you arm, if you do have one of those devices in line and you are are seeing the issue with the O3 is disconnecting when you arm, my advice would be to make sure everything's correct, take it out of line between your battery and the aircraft, and test it as it would be tested in the real world, and you'll probably find it will be fine. Now, as I have shown, the power situation on O3 is fairly straightforward. You need to make sure that your connector is correct. You have the correct input voltage range, 7.4 to 26.4. We have a BEC that is capable of providing enough power. And when you power it on, you should see that LED go green and then red, signifying that it is ready to bind. Now we have power. Next, we're going to talk about binding. Now, there are a few important things you need to be aware of before binding. Your goggles must have the special mode for O3. It is not the same mode as a VARTA. So for instance, on the DJI FPV goggles version 2, you will need to have updated the firmware to give you the option that shows you DJI Avata, but also DJI O3. The Avata mode is only for Avata. The O3 mode is for the O3 air units. On the goggles 2, things are a bit more straightforward. They basically have only 3 modes anyway. You have Avata, the new DIY mode, and the O3 mode. However, it's the V2s that people tend to have more problems with, mostly because they haven't updated their firmware in quite some time. To update it to the latest, you should put it in the FPV Drone mode, connect it to Assistant 2 for consumer drones or Assistant 2 for FPV, and perform the firmware update. If you're still not getting the mode for O3 under the menu, place the V2 goggles into Avata mode and then try to update the firmware again, and that will show you the correct options that are available. But again, you need to make sure that when you're doing this, you have that O3 mode available. Now, the binding process should be fairly straightforward. The first thing you need to check is that your air unit is powered and you have that red LED as being shown there. Then it's simply the case of binding to your goggles. So we're going to bind it to the V2s here. So I'm simply going to press the little button down there next to the power option. And I'm then going to press the little button here, which is signified by this arrow. Press that, the LED should flash, and then it will connect. And if everything is connected correctly, you should have a solid green light at all times. If the LED though is red, it is telling you that it is not connected to the goggles. From a binding point of view, everything is very straightforward. Your air unit needs to have power. You should be able to see the LED change. You need to make sure that your goggles have the O3 mode available and you are in that mode to be able to bind. Next, we're going to talk about connecting O3 to your flight controller, configuring Betaflight, but then give you some diagnostics on what to check if you're having problems getting the OSD working. Now, to get O3 working with your flight controller or Betaflight, the first thing you're obviously going to need to do is connect the two together via the physical wiring. We have power, UART, and an RC control connector. The basics are you need to connect the power, allowing the air unit to turn on, the UART, TX and RX lines, so the grey TX from the air unit to a spare RX on your flight controller, and the white RX on your air unit to a TX pad on your flight controller. That needs to be the same UART, so that TX and RX must be of UART 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6, whatever UART you have spare. And then you have the additional cable, which is the yellow one, which is used for the RC connection if you're going to be using the DJI remote controller. You do not need to connect that yellow wire though if you are using your own RC control system, such as Express, LRS or Crossfire. You only need the yellow one if you're using the DJI one. Most of the good flight controller manufacturers these days do have how-to guides on their website showing you how to connect that specific flight controller to either the DJI FPV air unit or the O3 air unit. As long as you follow this, you shouldn't go far wrong. What you can't do though is assume just because it fits, it's going to be fine. Once that is done, you need to then configure the MSP options on your flight controller. In Betaflight, whether it be 4.3 or 4.4, this is simpler today than it's ever been via the preset options, and I will show you how to do that now. In the past, you had to mess around with the ports tab as well as some command lines. However, today, things are much simpler simply as a result of the new preset options that are available in Betaflight. To To use these, you simply go down to the preset option on the left, then search for VTX. And what you're looking for is this one here called OSD for FPV.WTF, DJI, 03, Avatar HD. This you simply click, you then select the drop down option and the UART that corresponds to the UART that you have connected your O3 ear unit to. So in my case, it's UART 1. Click pick. You then simply click save and reboot, and that is it. Your OSD should then be working. Once you've done that, you should go down to the OSD options. Make sure that you do have OSD options showing here. And something else to check is what video format the OSD is actually showing. At the moment, DJI's O3 does not support the new HD OSD, so you're going to need to use PAL, but in the future you might want to be using the HD one if that does become available in future firmware versions, but here and now it's going to be PAL. The advice though is to manually select PAL and not leave it on auto. Make sure you've got the OSD elements that you want to use and then simply click save. Once that's done, you then should have the OSD elements from Betaflight showing and the DJI system picking up the data as well. What you should then see is the DJI OSD showing voltage in the bottom left corner, telling you that the system is receiving commands correctly, and you should see the Betaflight OSD showing on the display. This means when you arm the aircraft, you should then see that low power mode option disappear in the corner and recording start. And this is telling you that the flight controller is sending the commands to O3. Those commands are being received. The air unit is kicking in. It's starting recording and it's going to full power. Next, I'm going to walk you through what to check if you are having problems. OSD itself is only one part of the O3 system's communication. The O3 air unit needs to communicate with the flight controller to tell it when to exit low power mode, automatically start recording, but also then receive that MSP data for its internal OSD, but also the Betaflight OSD as well. If there is a problem with the communication, you may find parts of this work, but parts of it don't, and I'm going to walk you through what to check if you're having that now. The first scenario I'm going to show you is a loss of the grey wire, or what is the TX from the O3 air unit to the RX on your flight controller's UART. You can see that I've disconnected that wire here. If we hop on and look through the goggles themselves, you can actually see in this scenario you do get OSD. If I move my throttle up and down, you can see that it is reacting. You can see that the battery voltage is correct on the Betaflight OSD and everything else is showing. What you're not getting though is the information on the DJI OSD. So for instance, if you look at the bottom next to the little symbol, it's showing 0.0 volts. In this situation, it's also the case that it will not be receiving the MSP commands from the flight controller to tell it it's armed. So for instance, if I actually manually arm, you will see that the Betaflight OSD said it was armed, but nothing has changed on the O3 air unit. We are not recording and we remain in low power mode. Now, obviously in this situation, what you're not going to be getting is your air unit exit that low power mode, enter full power mode, and give you the full O3 performance. If you're getting this, what you need to do is check that that TX line from the O3 air unit to your flight controller is connected correctly. Now we'll take a look at what happens if you lose the RX line on the O3, which goes to the TX line on the flight controller, and that is the white wire you can see here. If we look on the display, you can see now we have no OSD working at all. The air unit is in low power mode. There's no MSP OSD. Nothing is working with regards to that MSP OSD at all. If I arm, you can see nothing changes. We're not getting the air unit exit low power mode. We're not getting any form of OSD kicking in at all. Obviously, in this scenario, what you'd need to be doing is checking that these connections are correct, but then you would need to go back and start looking at Betaflight, because this is very much the same type of issue that you would get if your MSP configuration isn't correct in Betaflight itself. Now, if you're still having OSD issues after doing the setup, configuration, and you've checked the hardware, there are a few other things that you can check in Betaflight, and I'll just walk you through the manual configuration checks for them now. As I showed earlier, we configured the MSP OSD with the preset, which is shown here, called OSD for FPV.WTF DJI O3 Avatar HD. The real important thing to make sure you are doing when selecting this is that you are using the correct UART. You are selecting the UART here, which your O3 air unit is connected to. If you have done this and you have checked all your hardware and you're still not getting OSD, you can manually check that that preset has configured Betaflight correctly. To do this, the first thing you want to do is go under ports, and the UART you selected should have MSP turned on as shown here. Secondly, on Betaflight 4.4, you should also see this option over here selected, which is VTX MSP plus DisplayPort. That should be on the UART that you have selected via the preset. The final thing you can also check is that your MSP DisplayPort has also been configured correctly in the CLI. To do this, you should click on CLI, go down, and you want to use the command get OSD _DisplayPort _device. When you select this, it will tell you what the current status is of that option, and it should be set to MSP as shown here. If it is set to anything else, what you will need to do is use the command that changes this, which is set OSD DisplayPort _device equals MSP. By doing that, that will then tell Betaflight to use that option for the MSP DisplayPort. Finally, you do need to check that you do have elements turned on in the OSD and that you do have the profile set to PAL as shown earlier in the video. It really is the case with OSD issues that it can be caused by either hardware or software. You should start your diagnostics with the hardware side of things, so make sure that you have your wiring correct, you know what UART you are connecting to, and you do have the TX to RX and the RX to TX. If that is all correct, you should then move into Betaflight and check everything there is correct as well, making sure that you are setting up that MSP DisplayPort on the correct UART. And if you have done all of that and you still don't get the OSD working, my advice to you would be to then try another UART. We have found that there are UARTs on some flight controllers that just don't work as expected with MSP OSD, and the only way to get around that is to put the DJI air unit on another UART on your flight controller rather than the one you're using it on. We don't fully understand today why that is the case. We do know that soft serial can be a problem, but there is UARTs that just don't want to play ball, and the only solution to that is swapping to another, redoing the configuration and trying it from there. Really, in the end, with regards to OSD, it can only come down to one of those things I've shown. Next, we're going to talk about signal or range issues. Now, there are only really two situations that can cause problems with range and signal on O3. The first is that your O3 air unit isn't receiving the correct commands and it is not entering the full RF power output. And the second is physical hardware issues with either the antennas on your air unit or the antennas on your goggles. First of all, we'll just recover over checking that your air unit is going to the full RF output, and then we'll move on to the hardware side of things. The first thing to check is that the O3 system is actually receiving a command from the flight controller. It's important to understand that O3 works a little bit different compared to the previous FPV system. Whilst before, the last FPV system could be told to go to full power output by turning off the low power mode, O3 works differently in the sense of whilst you can turn off low power mode, it doesn't kick it to maximum RF power output. The only time it will go to its maximum RF power in FCC mode is when you have it connected to a flight controller. To check that it is actually doing this, what you will see when you arm is that command in the bottom right hand corner saying low power mode vanish, and the air unit should start recording on either its DVR or on your goggles. For instance, if I arm, you will now see that the recording has started and that low power mode message has now vanished in the bottom corner. This is telling us that it is correctly receiving the arming command and it is able to then go to its maximum RF power output. If you are not seeing this happen, you need to go back to where I was talking about the MSP setup and follow that process, because that is all tied in with the OSD. The flight controller needs to communicate with the O3 air unit to not only send it the commands for the OSD, but also tell it when it is able to go to full power as well. Unfortunately, with O3, this does mean that if you're using it in a situation such as a wing or anything else without a flight controller, it is never going to go to the full RF power. It will only ever do that when it receives that arming command from a flight controller. Now, the range and performance of O3 will also be affected by the RF mode you're in. The O3 system is available in many countries, and as such, DJI are required to comply with the laws in each country. There are different levels of output available depending on what country you're in, and this is automatically set when you get your system. The way it works is that it configures this on activation, and whilst we don't have all of the details on that yet, we do know that if you're in a CE country, the system will go into CE mode, or if you're in America, it will go into FCC. There isn't a specific option to be able to select this, but you can tell what mode you're in by going into the channel selection menu. Under auto, the system will automatically configure itself in the background. However, if you set the channel mode to manual, you will be able to see what RF mode your O3 system is in. For instance, if you only have one channel available in manual when you set the system to 40 MHz, or you only have 3 channels available in 10 and 20 MHz, this tells you that your system is in CE mode. In FCC mode, you should have 3 channels available to select in 40 MHz mode and 7 channels available to select in 10 and 20 MHz mode. If your system is currently stuck in CE mode, there is a way to push it into FCC mode with a file called the ham file. This is a sort of a workaround or a mod file that forces the DJI O3 system into the maximum channels and maximum RF output. I do have a dedicated video on this subject, which I will link to in the description, but the very basics are that you place that file on the SD card, turn your goggles on with that file in, and you will then see the system open up to the maximum available channels. And in my testing on my spectrum analyzer, it also increases the RF power output as well. The thing to understand is if you're only seeing 1 channel in 40 MHz and 3 channels in 10 and 20 MHz, you're in CE mode. And if you're seeing 3 channels in 40 MHz and 7 channels in 10 and 20, you're in FCC mode. If you're at all unsure, the advice I would give is to perform the ham file mod. That way, your system will definitely be giving you the maximum RF power. If you're still having some pretty big issues with signal after that, the next thing is to start to look at your antennas. The first thing to look at is the antennas on your ear unit. You want to make sure that there's no damage to the antenna itself, that the outside housing all looks okay, and then you want to be looking at the antenna connections down here and here where they enter the ear unit to ensure that the cables themselves haven't got damaged and there isn't anything going on here. Normally, it's quite easy to see physical damage on this area here. It's very unlikely for the antennas to just come unplugged on O3 because they do have this plate that goes over the top, but it is possible to damage the cables around here if you were forcing them through a frame. Obviously, if everything looks good, the other thing I would suggest is just giving the antenna a little bit of a shake to make sure that there's nothing inside that rattles. And if you're still having problems at that point, I would suggest swapping this antenna for maybe some standard ones and then seeing how it performs. Goggles wise, there really isn't a lot to check on the antennas. You just want to make sure that they are plugged in correctly. So for instance, here on the Goggles 2, my left antenna is actually quite loose now. So you just want to make sure that that is pushed all the way in. Same as this one here, that it is making a proper connection. There is internal antennas in these goggles down here, but you're not going to be able to check them. More than anything, you just want to make sure that there's no damage to these at all and they are pushed in as tight as they can be. On the V2s, it's very much the same process. You want to make sure that the antennas are tight and that they don't continue to rotate when tight, or they don't feel like they ever get tight. If that is the case, it could indicate that the connector inside is broke. You should then just give them a wobble to see how they are. On mine, this one here is a little bit looser than the rest, and that's simply because the connector in there is a little bit loose, but it isn't actually a problem. What you're feeling for more than anything is that everything is okay and there isn't one that feels dramatically different from the others. Something else you can do is give the antennas a shake to see if there's any noise. It's often the case that when an antenna breaks, it can actually have something loose inside. And if there is any rattling from any of your antennas, it probably means that something has let go inside. Hopefully in this video I have covered most of the main issues people have getting their O3 working or using it on a daily basis. There are still a number of other things that I haven't touched on in this video, such as vibration in the footage, and I actually have a separate dedicated video on that which I will link to in the description if you're someone that is facing that. Overall, the steps in this video should help you diagnose any problems that you're having getting it to work with the OSD or anything with regards to signal. In the end though, it really does come down to each person's individual setup. There may be quirks in someone's setup that does have an effect that I haven't covered in this video, and I'd be really interested in knowing your thoughts if you're someone that is having something that I haven't been able to resolve here. Overall, if you follow the steps in this, you should have an O3 system that is working and you should be getting the best possible performance from it. I want to say, if you have found the information in this video useful, please do let me know what you think in the comment section. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think as well. Also, if you have found it useful and you'd like to support the channel, please do make sure you are a subscriber of the channel, and please do consider checking out the link to Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee in the description. It is only through the support of the donations on Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee am I able to keep making content like this, and if you think I have earned your support today, please do consider checking it out. I want to say a massive thank you from me to all of my Patreons. I would not be able to keep doing this without their support. Anyway, that's it from me on this one. I really do hope you found it interesting and useful. Please stay safe, and I will speak to you soon.